there are two ways, from my experience, two ways of doing chaos engineering if you would like to roll it out into the organization and to the teams. And one way could be just to implement controls, and the other way, guardrails. What is your view on this? What is your preferred way of doing it to enable engineers to get started with chaos engineering?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually like both controls and guardrails. So I guess there's a little bit of overlap in the terms, but like the controls, for instance, we have many teams. I don't know the exact number, but let's say several dozen teams, right? And each team has N number of services that they write and deploy. And each one of them is very important. Each team works on some amazing services. They deploy those services. A lot of them depend on each other. They call each other to perform certain pieces of work. That being said, you want to make sure that those controls are in place. So the controls that we put in place are, for instance, we don't want anyone experimenting on another team's service, right? So we make sure that that team has only the permissions to run an experiment on their own services or their own infrastructure. We also put into place controls, which I guess leans more towards the guardrails side of things. We have very specific pre-flight checks. We have basic pre-flight checks, things like making sure experiments are not being run on a holiday, making sure experiments are not being run when there's a code freeze going on, where maybe there's an event happening. We don't want experiments being run outside of business hours is another big one, because we don't want to cause an incident and have to page people and things like that. We'd rather do it when everybody's at work and ready to react if there needs to be a reaction. But other guardrails we put in place are the in-flight checks. So the in-flight checks, we have certain ways to detect what we call player drop. So as you know, Roblox is a gaming platform, very, very popular. We have tens of millions of people playing at any given time.
And my kids as well.
Yeah. So I'm glad they play. So player drop is just what it sounds like, right? We see a sudden drop in the metric for players, right? We track how many players are playing at a given time, and if we see a sudden drop that's anomalous, then we know, okay, something's happening, like something's going wrong with the system, and then we can start investigation from there and try to figure it out. So if we're running an experiment, we have an in-flight check that actually checks the player drop metric amongst a lot of other metrics as well, to make sure that like we're not seeing a player drop. If we do, it'll automatically abort the experiment right away. So that's very important. So controls is more around making sure that people are running appropriate experiments on their own infrastructure and services. That's one of our main controls. And then, those guardrails are more like the pre-flight checks, in-flight checks. Another form of guardrail is making sure that they're not putting in latency values or certain types of configurations for the experiment that we would consider to be like maybe too dangerous. Another check we do that we're working on actually is dependency checking. Like I mentioned earlier, like a lot of services will call each other. We also don't necessarily want, and sometimes we might, but in general, we don't want to experiment on services that are actually direct dependents of each other, just to make sure we're not causing a larger cascading failure than we intend. So,
okay. Yeah, that makes sense.